If your child was just diagnosed with celiac disease and you're feeling overwhelmed, this is the right place for you. I remember that feeling so clearly. The confusion, the worry, the constant questions that were running through my mind. My name is Asma. Welcome to Little Tummies, Big Challenges, the podcast for families raising children with celiac disease and raising gluten-free kids. I created this space because when our family first received this diagnosis, I felt like I was suddenly thrown into a world I didn't understand, and I didn't know where to begin. This podcast is here to make that journey a little less overwhelming for you. Our story. This is when celiac first entered our home. So we're going to talk about the first signs and symptoms, Sophie's journey. Looking back, there were signs, but at the time, we fully didn't connect them. In the fall of 2021, Sophie started showing symptoms that at first we didn't realize were serious. She had always been the type of child who had a bowel movement every other day. That was her normal. But by late August, just before starting preschool, things began to change. What used to be every other day became every 2 days, then 3 days, then 4 days, then 5 days, and it wasn't just constipation. This was extreme. At the same time, we started noticing other changes. Sophie became very restless. She could not sit still. She also had noticeable mood swings, especially after we'd been somewhere and we came home in the evening. She would exhibit those mood swings. So when we came home, we saw a completely different child than when we left in the morning. She was exhausted. It was like an extreme exhaustion, a moody, and just not herself. But the most concerning part of our celiac journey was the pain. She was in real physical pain, and we fully didn't understand why. At the age, Sophie didn't have the words to explain what she was feeling. But I remember one moment so clearly. This was in September of 2021, where we were in the bathroom and I was trying to relax her body. So I put her in the bathtub, ran some warm water. And I remember begging her, asking her if she could just show me what her belly felt like. And I remember her just squeezing my hand, taking it and just squeezing it. And that's when it clicked. Something was really wrong. Now, I don't want to say I'm not in the healthcare. I'm not a healthcare professional. And celiac can look very different for every single child. It's never going to be the same. The symptoms are not going to be the same. Some children may have frequent bowel movements, even daily, even like a couple times a day. They might not exhibit pain. But for Sophie, it was the complete opposite. Her longest stretch without a bowel movement during that time was 9 days. 9 days, which led us to hospitalization. And we still didn't have any answers. Looking back, her symptoms lasted about 3.5 to 4 months. From August all the way to mid-November, before we were able to even see a gastrologist. There were other signs too. Sophie became extremely restrictive with her food. She wasn't interested in food. She would scream, she would cry, she would be in pain, especially if she even had to pass gas or if she felt like she needed to go to the bathroom. And sometimes, after all that pain, all that screaming, all that crying, she wouldn't even go to the bathroom. As a parent, you just know, you see the changes, you know in your gut, something is wrong. Around the same time, we had just moved back from New Jersey to Michigan. We had a new pediatrician, and we were calling and contacting the pediatrician daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I would send messages, send them pictures, send them descriptions, and just keep them abreast. We were trying to share every single thing we saw about Sophie. But at first, we were told that maybe Sophie was just adjusting, that she hadn't been out much before, and this could just have been behavioral or environmental. And this is where I want to say to gently to some of the parents or any caregivers, trust your gut. You know your child better than anybody. Finally, we were able to get an appointment with a gastrologist in mid-November. At that appointment, we were given different treatments. At that moment, we were given different treatments. Things like Marilax and Metamucil, but nothing worked. We still didn't have answers. We did lots of blood work in that initial appointment with the gastrologist, and a few days later, I received a phone call from the doctor. I remember that moment really clearly. The doctor told me that Sophie's vitamin D was low, her iron was low, and he said something. He said her TTG and IgA levels were extremely high. And that's when he said, we believe that Sophie has celiac disease. That was the first time I ever heard those words, celiac disease. From there, the next steps were getting an endoscopy and genetic testing. I remember as a parent having to make those decisions, even though we had no idea of what might be going on, and it still felt really overwhelming for us. You're being told your child could have a lifelong condition for the rest of her life, and now you're being asked to move forward with all these procedures and all these tests, and some of these are invasive, and you just don't know. But we decided as a family to go ahead with both of these, the endoscopy and the genetic test, because we wanted clear answers. As scary as it felt, we needed to understand what was really going on inside of her body. The time between that phone call and the actual diagnosis was really hard. It was a mix. It was just waiting, worrying, Googling, probably like way too much Googling. I'm trying to really prepare ourselves for what life is going to look like, kind of forever almost. I remember thinking, what does this mean for her future? What does this mean that she can eat? How do we keep her safe? And honestly, we didn't have any of those answers yet. No answers. Then, in December of 2021, just before her 4th birthday, we got the confirmation that Sophie was officially diagnosed with celiac disease. I'll be honest, that was like a mix of emotions. I think you do feel like relief because you finally had some answers. It just wasn't, in your head, and you had validation, but we were scared. I was scared. I had a real fear because there was so much uncertainty around this. I really didn't have a grasp of celiac, and I didn't know what was going to come next. But looking back now, that diagnosis was also the beginning of a healing, because once we knew what we were dealing with, we could really start making Sophie feel better. What we wish we knew in that moment, if I could go back in that moment, I would tell you, or I would tell myself, that it's going to be okay. It feels so overwhelming right now, but you will learn this. We will get through this. Some of the misconceptions about celiac. At first I thought it was just like a gluten-free diet. I didn't understand how serious and the medical disease really is. I didn't understand how a quick, immediate lifestyle shift could suddenly change how Sophie was feeling. And suddenly everything in our kitchen felt like everything was a question mark and possibly wasn't safe, or was it safe, you know? I also think that our child's turning point, Sophie's turning point, what really stood out to me was once we removed gluten, we slowly began to see Sophie's changes. Slowly. So that was our immediate. So my message to all of you is that if you're waiting in that stage that you're just kind of figuring out what is her diagnosis, that part is so hard. It's so hard. But from there, the next steps that we did, as the endoscopy and the genetic tests, we decided to wait for our transition. Life before versus life after. Before celiac, food was really simple. After diagnosis, everything required thought. Everything required reading a label, decoding food labels, avoiding cross-contamination, explaining it to family, explaining it to friends, explaining it to your teachers, and things like birthday parties, school lunches became something that we really had to plan for. And there's another component, the emotional side. It's like really important. There's also that side of the journey that people don't always want to talk about. The emotional part, the worry about your child. Like, are they going to feel left out? When everyone's having those special birthday cakes, your child can't have that. Are they going to feel left out? The pressure of getting it right, making sure that their levels come down, making sure they don't have cross-contamination, that constant pressure. And then the moment of guilt. Wondering if you missed something. Wondering if you got your diagnosis sooner. But there's the strength that you build, the resilience your child will develop, and the small wins that really start to feel really, really big. We had those moments where we made mistakes and we learned from them. We had to advocate. We had to speak up. We had to learn how to re-explain things over and over again to family members. And at moments where we found joy in new routines, safe foods, and feeling healthier. Why I decided to create this podcast. That's exactly why I created this podcast, Little Tummies, Big Challenges, because I don't want other families to feel alone and so overwhelmed as we did in the beginning of our journey. And this podcast is a place where we'll talk about it. We'll talk about real life experiences, interview healthcare professionals, practical tips and conversations, and best practices, best tips, best birthday cakes you can make, and really know that you'll get through this. So what's coming up next? In our upcoming episodes, we're going to cover things like what to do right after the diagnosis, how to create a safe gluten-free kitchen and navigating schools and social situations, and how to support your child emotionally through this whole thing, through this whole journey. My call to you, if this resonates with you, I'd love for you to follow Little Tummy's Big Challenges and join me the next time we talk about what to do immediately after our celiac diagnosis, from our pantry cleanouts to label reading and learning how to take the first steps to breathe. Because you don't have to figure this out alone.